What we're looking at here is a dove field that's been planted in sunflowers. Sunflowers make a great attractant for doves if they're planted correctly. This is an example of sunflowers that have not been planted correctly. They've been drilled in very narrow rows. There's no herbicide used and there's been very little fertilizer. As you can see in the shot, the heads on the sunflowers are very small and they're going to produce very little seed. Doves have very weak legs and clean ground is very important for attracting doves. In order to plant these correctly, they would have needed to plant them in wide rows, like corn is planted in 32 or 36-inch rows. They would need to use some pre-emergent herbicides, and they would need to have fertilized them well in order to produce a lot of seed and in order to have that clean ground that's very important. You can see, looking at these sunflowers, that there's a lot of grass in these sunflowers. Even if they mow these sunflowers very close to the ground, there's still going to be a lot of grass stubble, and it's still going to be difficult for doves to walk through that. Planting sunflowers is not cheap. To do it right, you have to use those proper amounts of fertilizer, the proper amounts of herbicide, and they have to be planted correctly. Again, if planted correctly, sunflowers can be one of the best types of dove fields. But if planted incorrectly, as you see here, there's going to be very little attractant, and there's not going to be very many doves that use this field.
I'm Clint Borum, TWRA's private lands biologist for Middle Tennessee. I know you've already heard from Tim White about what not to do on dove fields. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about the right things to do and what works for a dove field, the correct way to establish a dove field, and how to manage that dove field. We're standing here in an excellent stand of sunflowers. Now these are, a better brand than just what you would go buy as a bag of birdseed at the co-op. These are really good, high quality sunflowers. As you can see, some really large heads, and they're 5 to 8 feet tall in spots. What was important about establishing a stand that turned out this well was the preparation work that was put into this stand and the planting methodology that went along with it. It's important to remember with doves that bare ground is one of your most important points to think about with doves. Doves love to get down on the ground and pick seeds, and so having grass and other plants in your dove field is not usually an optimal situation. What you want to do is create that bare ground within or adjacent to your dove field. We've done that in this stand by using herbicides to control noxious species and grasses. It worked really well, as you can see behind me. We have a lot of bare cover underneath these sunflowers, and there's a little bit of grass in here, but you can always come back and use those herbicides to eradicate or control that grass within your stand. Now, another important factor in this dove field particularly was the method in which we planted it. We used a drill to plant these sunflowers rather than broadcast them. What that will do is it will give you proper spacing between your plants to allow for maximum growth potential in each one of your plants. As you can see here, these are, I'm 6 feet tall and this one stands head high to me, and there are others in the field that are taller than I am. So it really allowed this plant to reach its maximum potential by creating the right spacing between each plant and the right spacing between each row allowed for maximum growth on that plant. So that's important to remember. If you really want to maximize the potential on your dove field, look at utilizing one of your local soil conservation districts or your co-op, or borrowing a friend's drill, no-till drill, to plant those sunflowers. Now again, herbicides were important on establishment and throughout the process of growing and maintaining this particular dove field. What's also important is looking at your planting dates and your maturation dates on the plants that you're planting. Sunflowers have a pretty long date until they reach maturity from the time that you plant them. So you want to make sure you get them in the ground early enough that they'll be mature when it's time to hunt over that field. A lot of mistakes that are made on sunflower fields are fields that are planted too late in the year, late May and June, which don't get an opportunity to mature by the 1st of September. With this field, we got it in at the right time, and as you can see, it's mid-August now, and these plants are starting to die and dry up and bend over. Now these sunflowers, when they dry, will begin to fall from these heads. When they're not completely dry, they're really gummy and they stick to the seed head. So the birds will come and light on them, but the seeds don't actually hit the ground. What you want is for these plants to be dead and dry a week or two before the season, so that when you come in and start bush hogging portions of this field, those seeds will shatter and spread out. If they're still gummy and pliable, they'll stay within the seed head and they won't become dispersed across the ground to provide more area, more feeding area for your doves. So remember, make sure you get them planted at the right time of year. Make sure they mature before the season, they become dry. Use the correct herbicides to keep bare ground adjacent to or within your dove field. That's really important point. You can also locate your stand near some dead standing trees or snags. Those provide good roosting area for doves. Doves will stay on those areas throughout the day, fly off, come in and feed, and fly back up. So key points to take home from this particular session are proper herbicide use and prep on your plots, proper planting methodology, and paying attention to the maturation dates on the seeds that you're planting. If you plant too early or too late, it can cause a big issue. If you don't create good open ground cover at ground level, that can be a problem with dove use also. And just make sure that you follow label instructions on herbicides and that you talk to your local representative or wildlife biologist about what types of seeds, sunflower seeds or different seeds you want to use to plant in your dove field.
What we have here is an example of a planted dove field. They've got two different crops planted in this field. They have sunflowers around the outside of the field and millet on the interior of the field. This type of millet is foxtail millet. There are several different kinds of millet that are extremely popular to plant for doves. This is foxtail, brown top's another one. The most preferred type of millet to plant for doves is one called white Proso millet. Clean ground is very important when managing a dove field. The millet, on the other hand, in this field looks very good. There's a very good stand of the millet. It's shaded out most of your weeds. And in order for this millet to be managed properly, they're going to have to come in and either burn it or mow it very tight to the ground. And if they do that, there'll be a lot of clean ground and it'll be very attractive for doves. The bare areas you see out here in this sunflower field are an area where they're going to plant a wildlife food plot. It is legal to plant a wildlife food plot and hunt doves over it. They're planning on disking this area and top sowing wheat onto that area, which is a legal form of a wildlife food plot. They have to follow the recommended rates for planting the proper amount of seed, and they have to be careful that they don't sow wheat over into the standing sunflowers. But when done correctly, a top-sowed wheat wildlife food plot can be very attractive for doves. It is legal to hunt mourning doves over a properly planted wildlife food plot. The food plot must be planted according to the UT Agricultural Extension guidelines for the various types of food plots. These guidelines provide the proper seeding dates and proper seeding rates for the various types of crops that you can plant. One of the most popular types of wildlife food plots that people hunt mourning doves over is a winter wheat food plot. UT Ag Extension guidelines state for a winter wheat food plot, it can be planted after August 15th. The recommended seeding rates are 1.5 up to 3 bushels per acre of certified seed. If you're using uncertified seed, which is also known as feed wheat, you can use 50% more than this recommended seeding rate. One of the things you can't do when planting a winter wheat food plot is you can't pile the seed up. It must be evenly distributed. You also can't come back and sow wheat over the same area twice. It can only be planted one time. What some landowners choose to do, as you see in this picture, they're preparing their field for planting. and they have hedgerows set up to divide the field into sections. They'll plant one section, wait several days, maybe a week, and plant the other section. This is legal, but you can't spread wheat into the previously planted area, thus they have the breaks in the field.